So hey guys, welcome back to another video of Just Medical Stuff, and today we'll be talking about a very important topic, that is diabetes mellitus. Now this diabetes mellitus is very common nowadays. One in every third person is actually suffering from diabetes. So let us go into the details of this topic. So what does the word diabetes actually mean? So according to Greek terminology, the word diabetes, it means to pass through. The word diabetes means to pass through, and the word mellitus, it means sweet. So collectively it means to pass something sweet. And yes, we all know that a patient with diabetes actually has amount of sugar in its urine. So a normal person does not have sugar in its urine. So this makes this thing a bit unique. So let us go to the other symptoms of diabetes mellitus. So the other symptoms are polyuria, that is the person urinates a lot. There is polydipsia, that the person is thirsty a lot. Polyphagia, the person eats a lot. Weight loss. Now this is a bit tricky, that the person is eating a lot but still losing a lot of weight. This is because in type 1 diabetes mellitus, the pancreatic beta cells are damaged and they cannot actually give the amount of sugar, the amount of glucose to the cells to utilize for energy. You'll understand this thing a bit later. And the other symptoms are fatigue, frequency of infections. Due to the presence of sugar in urine, there is a high chance of UTI infections. There is a rapid onset. The person has insulin dependent, that is the person requires the doses of insulin every now and then. And there is a familial tendency, that if the parents are suffering from diabetes mellitus, then yes, the children can also suffer from diabetes mellitus. The peak incidence is from 10 to 15 years. That is type 1 diabetes mellitus, it mostly occurs in younger patients, and type 2 diabetes mellitus is mostly seen in older patients. Now let us go a bit on the type of diabetes mellitus. So people mostly know that yes, we have only two type of diabetes mellitus, but that is wrong. We have four type of diabetes mellitus. So they are type 1 diabetes mellitus, we have type 1, we have type 2, we have type 1.5, and we have MODY. So type 1 diabetes, we'll be talking about this thing in today's video. Now what is type 2 diabetes mellitus, you will get to know in a separate video. I'll make a separate video for all these four type of diabetes mellitus. But type 1, okay, you know that there is destruction of the pancreatic beta cells. In type 2 diabetes mellitus, the pancreatic beta cells, they are defective. So in type 1 diabetes mellitus, there is destruction. There is destruction of pancreatic beta cells. And in type 2 diabetes mellitus, we actually have defective. That is, they are not destructed. They are not damaged, but they are defective. The beta cells, they are defective. And in type 1.5, it is actually a subtype of type 1 diabetes mellitus. So it is a type of type 1 diabetes mellitus, you can say. It is a type of type 1. The other name for type 1.5 diabetes mellitus is LADA. We call this thing as LADA. So what is LADA? LADA stands for latent autoimmune diabetes mellitus of adults. Stands for autoimmune latent autoimmune diabetes mellitus of adults. And then we have another type of diabetes mellitus, that is MODY. That is mature onset diabetes mellitus of young. You can call it as mature onset diabetes mellitus of young. We'll talk about all these type of diabetes in details in the next videos, but for now you need to get that yes, we have actually four different type of diabetes. So now let us start with the diagnosis of diabetes. So to confirm the diagnosis, we have three criteria. So we can either have classical symptoms plus a random blood sugar. If the person is asymptomatic, we can we can go for a fasting blood sugar test. If the person is again asymptomatic, we can also go for HbA1c levels. So what are the classical symptoms of diabetes mellitus? I told you all these symptoms of diabetes mellitus, but from all these symptoms we have only three conditions which are actually the classical symptoms of diabetes mellitus. So we have three conditions. We have polyuria, we have polydipsia, and we have weight loss. Now, these three, polyuria, polydipsia, and weight loss, these three are the classical symptoms of diabetes mellitus. But why not polyphagia? Because we cannot measure how much the person is eating. This cannot be measured. Yes, we can measure how much the person is actually passing their urine. We can measure how much the person is drinking, how much liters of water the patient is drinking. We can measure how much the patient has lost their weight, but how can we measure how much the person is eating? This is actually a bit tricky. That is why these three, polyuria, polydipsia, and weight loss, these three are considered as the classical symptoms of diabetes mellitus. So for diagnosis, we can have classical symptoms which we know are polyuria, polydipsia, and weight loss plus random blood sugar. Now, how much should be the random blood sugar level to actually say the person is diabetic? So it should be more than 200. It should be more than 200 mg percentage to call a person actually diabetic. And if the person is asymptomatic, we can go for a fasting blood sugar test. Now, the normal amount should be less than 100. In normal person, the amount should be less than 100, and if the amount is between 100 to 125, then you can call this person as pre-diabetic. You can call this person as a pre-diabetic person. If it is more than 126, then you can call this person as diabetic. Now this you should remember, that yes, a random blood sugar level more than 200 diabetic, fasting blood sugar level more than 126 is diabetic. In a normal person it should be 100, should be less than 100, and in a pre-diabetic person it should be between 100 to 125. Now what about HbA1c? If you look for HbA1c, the normal amount of HbA1c should be less than 5.6%. And so in this is for a normal person, and if the amount is more than 6.5, more than or equal to 6.5, then you can call this person as diabetic. So I'll repeat again, that HbA1c in a normal individual is less than 5.6, and in a diabetic person it is more than 6.5. Now between 5.6 to 6.5 is a person you can call them as pre-diabetic. So these were used for the diagnosis of diabetes mellitus. We have random blood sugar with the classical symptoms. If the person is asymptomatic, you can go for a fasting blood sugar test or an HbA1c level. Now, for how long do we get the measurement for a HbA1c? Now this HbA1c can know the status of a person, the sugar levels of a person for actually 3 months. Crazy, right? For 3 months you can actually know the sugar level of a person from HbA1c level. Now what is the serum fructosamine for? Now from serum fructosamine you can get to know the sugar values of a person for 2 weeks. So HbA1c here, HbA1c was for 3 months, and the serum fructosamine was for 2 weeks. So this was all about the diagnosis part. So let us start with the definition, with the main description about type 1 diabetes mellitus. So in type 1 diabetes mellitus, you should know that here we have destruction. We have destruction of pancreatic beta cells. Now in pancreas we have four different type of cells, you can say. We have alpha cells, we have beta cells, we have delta cells, and we have pancreatic polypeptide. Okay, so these alpha cells, they secrete a hormone which is called as glucagon. Pancreatic beta cells, they secrete, you know very well, they secrete insulin. Delta cells on the other hand, they secrete somatostatin. And the pancreatic polypeptide, PP cells, they secrete pancreatic polypeptide. Now the function of glucagon is actually opposite to the function of insulin. So insulin, what it does, it sends the amount of glucose into the cells, and glucagon does the opposite. It increases the amount of glucose in the blood. And the somatostatin over here, this is something crazy, you can say. Somatostatin, it actually inhibits the function of both glucagon and insulin. So glucagon ने अपना काम किया, इंसुलिन ने अपना काम किया, somatostatin ने दोनों का काम ही बंद कर दिया. और पैनक्रियाटिक पॉलीपेप्टाइड, ये एक पॉलीपेप्टाइड है, इसका फंक्शन हम बाद में देखेंगे. तो अभी इसके डिटेल्स पे जाते हैं. तो आप यहाँ पे देख सकते हैं कि ये बीटा सेल है. ओके, दिस इज अ बीटा सेल. This is a beta cell, a pancreatic beta cells. And this sugar, you might have learned in your biochemistry classes that yes, sugar, it actually acts on the GLUT4 receptors which are present on the pancreatic beta cells. GLUT4 receptors. So sugar, it acts on the GLUT4 receptors on the pancreatic beta cells, and this leads to the release of insulin, C-peptide and amylin. So the thing to be noted here is that the amount of insulin and the amount of C-peptide, they are always same. So they are in a ratio of 1 is to 1. C-peptide and insulin are always in a ratio of 1 is to 1. So in a patient of diabetes mellitus, we all know that insulin is less. Okay, डिस्ट्रक्शन हो रही है पेनक्रियाटिक बीटा सेल्स की, इंसुलिन कम हो रहा है, तो इंसुलिन के साथ साथ सी पेप्टाइड भी कम होगा. सो इंसुलिन इज ऑल्सो डिक्रीज्ड इन अ पेशेंट ऑफ डायबिटीज mellitus and सी पेप्टाइड इज ऑल्सो डिक्रीज्ड. C-peptide is also decreased in a patient of diabetes mellitus. Now, what about this amylin? This amylin actually regulates the motility of the stomach. It regulates the motility. It regulates motility in stomach. So these were the three substances, hormones, you can say insulin hormone, C-peptide and amylin secreted from the pancreatic beta cells. And in diabetes mellitus, both insulin and C-peptide are low, and in a condition known as insulinoma, in a condition called as insulinoma, we have increased amount of insulin and we have increased amount of C-peptide. These two, they are like best friends, they go hand in hand. If one is less, the other will also become less. If one is more, the other will also become more. So these two are basically best friends. Now you can say that yes, glucagon and insulin, they work in the opposite ways. ग्लूकागॉन जो होता है ब्लड में शुगर का लेवल बढ़ाता है, इंसुलिन कम करता है. तो अगर किसी को हाइपोग्लाइसीमिया हुआ, ठीक है, अगर किसी को हाइपोग्लाइसीमिया हुआ और उनका जो शुगर लेवल है, इफ द शुगर लेवल of a person, it drops to less than 70. If the sugar levels drops to less than 70, then insulin here stops working. Insulin stops working and glucagon starts acting. That is, it keeps this 70 mg, which is required for our body cells to get energy from, for our body cells to function, कि हम हाइपोग्लाइसीमिया में ना जाए, हाइपोग्लाइसीमिया के सिम्टम्स ना आने लग जाए, palpitations ना हो, ट्रेमर्स ना हो, स्वेटिंग ना हो. ये 3 मेन सिम्टम्स है हाइपोग्लाइसीमिया के, कि पर्सन हाइपोग्लाइसेमिक शॉक में ना चला जाए. इन चीजों के लिए दिस ग्लूकागोन एक्ट्स लाइक अ हीरो ओवर हियर, एंड इट maintains the amount of glucose in our body. So if the level is less than 70 mg percentage, insulin stops working, glucagon starts working and acts as a hero and saves our lives. Now, what do you say? How much would be the level for which we can actually diagnose hypoglycemia? Now, if the level it drops to less than 55 mg percentage, then you can call this as hypoglycemia. So less than 55, you call it as hypoglycemia. Less than 70, insulin stops working and glucagon starts acting and saves our lives. So this was all about the description about type 1 diabetes mellitus. So let us start with the causes of diabetes mellitus. So the causes, they can be autoimmune conditions, and this autoimmune cause, this is the most common cause. This autoimmune cause is actually the most common cause of diabetes mellitus. Now, in the autoimmune condition, we have certain factors. We have HLA, DQ2, DR3 and DR4 genes. So these genes are responsible for the autoimmune causes of type 1 diabetes mellitus, and this autoimmune is the most common factor. Now, what are the viruses that can cause type 1 diabetes mellitus? We can have mumps. We can have mumps. we can have rubella, we can have Coxsackie virus. And what is bronze diabetes? So this bronze diabetes is actually occurring due to iron toxicity. And there are three triads. We have hyperpigmentation, we have cirrhosis, and we have pancreatic beta cell destruction. So these three, they make up the triad for bronze diabetes. Now let us go to the treatment. So how can we treat a person with diabetes? So the treatment basically it depends on which type of diabetes the person is actually suffering from. If the person has type 1, we have these treatments. If the person has type 2, I'll talk about the treatment options in my next video. So for the first thing we should actually do in a patient with diabetes is we should actually monitor their carbohydrate counting. So we should actually monitor how much amount of carbohydrate the person is actually taking, and according to the amount of carbohydrate intake we should give the insulin to the patient. So what is actually the route of administration of insulin? We mostly go with the subcutaneous route. We have the subcutaneous route for administration of glucose. So what are the sites of administration of insulin? So we have many sites over here. The first thing we have anterior abdominal wall. We have anterior abdominal wall, but there should be at least 2 centimeter of distance from the umbilicus. So there should be 2 centimeters away from the umbilicus. We can have the arm, we can have the buttocks, we can have the anterolateral aspect of thigh. And one place where we should never actually give insulin is the dorsum of your hand. Dorsum of hand. Here you should never give insulin, never. So what were the sites of insulin administration? I'll show you in this photo. You can have your anterior abdominal wall, but you should at least keep a 2 centimeter distance around your umbilicus. You can have your buttocks, you can have your upper arms, and you can have your thighs also, the anterolateral aspect of your thigh, but never on the dorsum of the hands. Dorsum of the hands, you will never give insulin. How can you actually deliver the insulin to a patient with type 1 diabetes mellitus? You can have an insulin pump, but these insulin pumps are quite expensive, but they are very beneficial. Uh, what now, how do they actually work? These insulin pumps, they cause a continuous release of basal insulin, and the thing is that they can release bolus insulin also depending on the rate proportion of your carbohydrate intake. So they are very beneficial, but the thing is that they are expensive. So this is how an insulin pump works. This is an infusion set over here. This is an infusion pump, and here it can go, this patch here, it can continuously monitor the glucose level, and it can indicate how much insulin actually needs to be released or actually needs to be infused in a patient. Therefore this is how a insulin pump actually works. So we spoke about the insulin pump, and now we'll talk about the insulin pen. Now this insulin pen here is also painless and bloodless. This is also effective. And we also have another option. We have inhaled insulin. We call it as a freezer. Now this is how a inhaled insulin looks like. This is a pump, and this part here, it goes in our mouth and we have to inhale it. And there can be different units of insulin which we can use over here. We can have 4 units of insulin, 8 units, and 12 units of insulin. So this was all about the delivery method of insulin. So let us now go to the complications of insulin. So for the complications, we have Somogyi effect and we have Dawn phenomenon. So what is the Somogyi effect? Now the Somogyi effect occurs when a person takes a high dose of insulin at their bedtime, which further leads to hypoglycemia. So insulin is more, so a lot amount of sugar will go into the cells, so there will be hypoglycemia, and the person will have symptoms of palpitations, tremors, and diaphoresis. Diaphoresis here means excessive sweating. So I told you that if the level of sugar drops down to less than 70, then glucagon starts working and insulin stops working. So the same thing has happened here. Glucagon came into circulation, caused glycogenesis, which increased the blood sugar value and led to pre-breakfast hypoglycemia. So this was all about the Somogyi effect. Now what is Dawn phenomenon? In Dawn phenomenon, we have pre-breakfast hyperglycemia because of down regulation of GLUT4 receptors. So this was all about the complications of insulin, about Somogyi effect and Dawn phenomenon. Now we'll go for the complications of type 1 diabetes. There are microvascular complications and macrovascular complications. In microvascular complications, we can have retinopathy, that is eye damage, which can lead to blindness. We can have nephropathy, which can cause kidney damage. In now this nephropathy here, it is the most common cause of chronic kidney disease in India and in USA. Then we have neuropathy, which can cause nerve damage. In macrovascular complications, we have cerebrovascular disease, which can cause a risk of stroke. We have cardiovascular disease, which can cause heart attack, MI, angina, Prinzmetal angina, and we have peripheral vascular disease, which can cause decreased amount of circulation to the limbs and can increase the chance of gangrene formation in the patient. So this was all about the complications, micro and macrovascular complications. So we spoke about everything you need to know about type 1 diabetes, and I will be speaking about type 2 diabetes and all the rest two type of diabetes later on. We have type 2, we have MODY, and we have type 1.5 left, and I'll be talking about those in my next videos. So till then, keep on studying, and thank you for watching.